Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the deep and silent spaces where God's mysteries live, not shouted from mountaintops, but whispered gently through the parables of Jesus. You find yourself beneath a starlit sky, the kind that feels like it stretches forever. A soft breeze carries the scent of olive trees, and somewhere just beyond your hearing, an angel leans close to listen. You're standing at the edge of understanding not just stories, but secrets hidden within them like pearls in the folds of sand. The parables of Jesus aren't just moral lessons or quaint illustrations. They are vaults, quiet, ancient spiritual vaults that hold within them divine prophecy and supernatural insight. The world may have heard them thousands of times, but most people walk right past the locked door. Tonight you hold the key. You'll step gently through them one by one like a barefoot traveler through a moonlit garden. You'll see what's usually missed. You'll feel what's typically ignored. And if you listen closely enough, you might just hear heaven breathing through every line. This journey, you probably won't survive it, unless you've got wings or a direct line to the Almighty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in Galilee, where Jesus often wandered barefoot, robe-brushing dust eyes, seeing more than they ever revealed. He opens his mouth to speak, but what comes out isn't a direct command or declaration. It's a story, a riddle, a parable. The disciples lean in, so do you. The first parable he shares is simple: a sower goes out to sow. Seeds fall on different kinds of ground. Some are eaten by birds, others wither, and a few flourish. It seems straightforward until you pause. Why use a story at all? Why not just say the truth plainly? Here's your first secret: Jesus hides truth in plain sight. The parables are layered. On the surface, they're stories, but beneath they're scrolls quietly unrolling ancient prophecies. This is not storytelling for children. This is the language of heaven encrypted for the ears of the Spirit. In the parable of the sower, Jesus describes more than human hearts. He speaks of history of prophetic generations that receive or reject the word of God. The birds that steal the seed. In prophetic shadow language, birds often symbolize demonic interference, the shallow soil. That's the nation that receives with joy, but under Roman pressure withers. The thorns, the world money power, choking out divine truth across eras. And that good soil. It isn't just a personality type. It's a prophetic remnant. Those who will carry the message forward across ages, including perhaps you. Some scholars argue Jesus crafted these parables specifically to obscure meaning from the unprepared. Others say he used them to protect the sacred from mockery. But here's the deeper mystery: prophecy is often hidden not just to protect it, but to prepare the one who discovers it. Let's take a breath. Close your eyes if you want. You can almost hear Jesus' voice now, calm, certain, oddly comforting. He's not yelling from a podium. He's speaking gently across time. You're hearing him from your pillow, from the edges of sleep. His words are alive. They are meant not just to inform, but to transform. Remember that strange passage where Jesus says, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything is in parables." That's not elitism, it's spiritual intimacy. He's offering secrets to the ones willing to sit still long enough to hear them. Parables aren't a filter, they're a funnel. Those who lean in get everything. There's something else odd too, something rarely mentioned. Why does Jesus so often speak of agriculture, seed, soil, harvest? Because he's echoing Genesis. The parables are part of a quiet restoration project. Every tale of growth and planting is a subtle reversal of Eden's fall. Where Adam failed to tend the garden, the new Adam, Christ, tends a field of souls. You are part of that field. Here's a spiritual curiosity you might not have heard. In ancient rabbinical tradition, riddles and story forms were often used to cloak messianic messages. They would talk around prophecy as if sketching it in fog. Jesus steps into that tradition and fulfills it. His parables are fog sketches of the coming kingdom. And when he tells a parable, he is also performing a prophetic act, like when he tells of a fig tree and then curses a real one, or when he tells of lost sheep, then sends the disciples to the lost sheep of Israel. The first parable is never just the sower, it's the whole plan. From creation to restoration, from chaos to seed, from silence to harvest. And it begins now, right here, in the quiet space of your room, with your breathing slowing, and your heart becoming soil. Did you know there's a Jewish midrash that says, when God spoke at Mount Sinai, each person heard the voice differently, uniquely tuned to their soul? That's what the parables do. They sound like stories, but to you right now they're maps. They don't shout, they wait. And maybe that's why Jesus says, he who has ears, let him hear. Because hearing is how the kingdom begins. You find yourself drawn to something impossibly small, a seed. It rests in your hand, smaller than your fingernail, lighter than a sigh. You tilt your palm and it nearly vanishes. This is no ordinary seed. It is the mustard seed, the tiniest in Jesus' collection of metaphors. And tonight it whispers prophecy. You remember the moment Jesus spoke of it, don't you? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. That's all. Or so it seems. But this seed isn't about gardening. It's about glory wrapped in silence. The people around Jesus probably chuckled. A kingdom like that. Something so great, born from something so small. It was a divine joke with a serious punchline. And here's the hidden prophecy that God's reign, his full majestic kingdom, would arrive not in thunder or temple columns, but through an invisible start, a whisper, a fragile thread in the hands of a carpenter's son. No war horses, no flashing swords, just quiet beginnings, just faith buried deep. You stand in the field now, the dirt warm and dry beneath your feet. In this sleep-hallowed moment, you see that seed fall just once and disappear into the ground. There's no applause, no choir, just a pause. And that is where the kingdom begins. Some theologians argue this parable isn't prophecy at all, just an encouragement for patience. Others say it foreshadows the rise of Christianity from obscurity. But the secret whispers deeper. It isn't only about the church, it's about you. You, the unlikely ground in which heaven dares to root itself. You who feel small, unnoticed, maybe even foolish for your faith. The seed says, wait. What God plants in silence, he grows into shelter. Jesus adds, though it is the smallest of all seeds, when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that birds come and perch in its branches. Ah, the birds again. In the parable of the sower, they devoured the seed agents of theft and interruption. But here, they're guests in the branches. The very same forces once seen as adversaries now rest within the tree's embrace. That reversal, that's prophecy, hidden, gentle, profound. The mustard seed becomes a paradox, a plant that defies its category. In nature, mustard is more of a shrub. But Jesus describes it becoming a tree, something larger, something unnatural. Some scholars point to that strangeness as symbolic. The kingdom doesn't just grow, it transcends its natural expectations. And so do you. That which is small in you, your quiet prayers, your whispered doubts, your slow forgiveness, is becoming something unexpectedly eternal, maybe even unnatural in the best way. And here's a lesser-known spiritual curiosity in Jewish eschatological tradition. There's a belief that God's presence will eventually fill the earth as water covers the sea. The mustard seed then is not merely a plant, it is the first drop in that coming tide. You stand beside it now, watching it grow, not like time-lapse video, but in sacred time. Leaves stretch not only toward light, but toward prophecy, toward what has been promised. You wonder, why didn't the disciples press him more about this parable? Why didn't they ask for specifics? Maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they understood that something that begins so quietly could never be explained out loud. Some believe the mustard seed represents the Holy Spirit's quiet arrival. After all, when the Spirit descends at Pentecost, it's with wind, yes, but no armies, just fire and breath. A whisper again. Others think the parable's tree is a picture of the cross, planted once, growing ever since. Wood that would bear the weight of every burden and still give shelter to all who seek it. Can you see it now? Not just a seed, but a foreshadowed tree. A cross hidden inside a tiny beginning. A kingdom where death itself finds no purchase. And perhaps here's the most peaceful irony of all. Jesus compares his reign to something that, in its earliest form, is often overlooked. That's the divine joke again. The kingdom of God doesn't arrive with a bang. It grows when you're looking the other way. It thrives when you're too tired to notice. It roots itself in your dreams. And maybe tonight that's exactly what's happening, right now in you. You might not feel like much. You might even feel buried. But remember, so is every seed before it breaks open into life. And you are not breaking, you are becoming. You are not buried, you are planted. So let the soil stay soft around your soul tonight. Let God work in the dark. Let the mustard seed within you rest a little longer until it is time to stretch toward eternity. And remember, the kingdom isn't coming. It's already begun. The scent of freshly baked bread drifts in from somewhere unseen, warm and faintly sweet. You follow it not with your feet, but with your spirit, and find yourself in a small clay-walled kitchen. There, a woman moves silently, her hands deep in dough, her fingers coated with flour. She lifts a pinch of leaven and folds it into the mixture, just a handful, barely visible. Yet everything changes. Jesus told this parable in a single breath. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. It sounds domestic quiet, but within it lies a prophecy hidden in simplicity. And tonight, in your half-dreaming mind, you begin to feel the echo. Leaven isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like a prophet in the marketplace. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It works invisibly, slowly, thoroughly. Just like the kingdom, just like grace, just like prophecy. 3 measures of flour is no small batch. It's enough to feed a whole village. But even so, the leaven begins its work in silence. There is no fanfare, no thunder, only the soft, slow miracle of transformation. And that's the point. This parable is not about baking. It's about time and how God moves through it, how eternity spreads inside the ordinary until nothing stays untouched. Some scholars believe this parable references Abraham's hospitality when he told Sarah to prepare 3 seahs of flour for divine guests. That moment, too, was prophetic. The angels came not only to eat, but to speak of a birth, a promise, a future. Could it be that Jesus was layering that moment beneath this one, perhaps? Perhaps the leaven isn't just about the kingdom entering the world. Perhaps it's about divine presence entering your story, quietly changing every part, even the parts you'd rather stay untouched. Leaven, after all, doesn't ask permission. It transforms everything. There's a theological debate, though, a delightful one, soft as flour on the fingertips. In Jewish thought, leaven often symbolizes sin, corruption, or pride. So why would Jesus compare the kingdom to it? Some believe it's deliberate contrast, flipping expectations upside down. Others say he was reclaiming the image, as he often did, taking something feared and turning it holy. It might help to know this in Jesus' time. Leaven wasn't a dry packet from a store. It was a piece of old dough fermented and kept alive. It carried with it the past, feeding the future. So when the woman hides it in the flour, she's folding history into destiny. That's what God does with you. Your story, everything you've been through, even the things you've hidden, is leaven in his hands. He doesn't discard it. He kneads it in, he lets it rest. And eventually it rises. Isn't that strangely comforting? To know that what you carry isn't wasted but transformed. To realize that even now in the dim light of your room, God's hand is working your life like dough, softening it, expanding it, giving it breath. There's also a hidden numerology in this parable, 3 measures. Theologians whisper of this as symbolic of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit folding into the flour of humanity. Others suggest it points to the 3 parts of a person, body, soul, and spirit, each one meant to be raised into divine fullness. And then, of course, there's the woman. She works alone, unnamed, unseen, and yet she is the one through whom the kingdom comes. This is no accident. The leavened kingdom does not arrive through empires or priests. It arrives through the hidden, the ordinary, the ones who fold faith into their days quietly. Like you, it may be slow. You may not see the change overnight. But trust this, it is working. The word is working. The kingdom is leavening. The hidden transformation is taking place. Some parts of you will resist, just like tough dough resists the hand, but keep breathing, keep resting, keep letting the process unfold. Because what God begins in secret, he finishes in glory. Can you feel it now? The warmth, the rise, the invisible miracle happening inside you. A lesser-known curiosity in some apocryphal writings, the image of leaven is used as a metaphor for wisdom, ancient, feminine, and indwelling. Wisdom that does not command, but seeps into everything. Maybe that's why Jesus chose this metaphor, because the kingdom isn't about domination, it's about saturation. One final mystery, Jesus says the woman hid the leaven in the flour. That word is deliberate. The kingdom is hidden. Not because God wants to keep it from you, but because it's something precious, something sacred, something that grows best when it's wrapped in the folds of trust. So here you are resting in the folds. The kingdom is already in you. And though it moves slow, it moves surely. Tomorrow you'll wake and things will seem the same. The same room, the same size, the same sky. But something will be different. Something within you will have risen. And you won't know exactly when it happened. only that it did. You walk now through open fields beneath a lavender sky, the last light of day softening the edges of the earth. In the distance, a shepherd moves across the hills, his figure small but purposeful. He leaves behind 99 sheep, each one accounted for grazing safely. His eyes scan the horizon. His heart beats for the one. Jesus says if a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 and go after the one that is lost? It's a simple tale, a pastoral moment. But beneath the blades of grass and the dusty path, there's prophecy again, quiet, steady, divine. The parable of the lost sheep isn't just a lesson in care, it is a map of pursuit. A whisper of what the Messiah would do and what he still does. Some scholars believe this parable is a reference to Ezekiel 34, where God rebukes the false shepherds of Israel and promises, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. When Jesus tells this story, he isn't just teaching, he's fulfilling. Silently, subtly. You are the sheep, not in a patronizing way, but in a precious way. You who wandered maybe even without realizing. You who thought you had to earn your way back. But this shepherd doesn't wait for a trail of footprints. He goes, and not with frustration, with joy. Jesus says, and when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing, rejoicing. Pause here. Let that settle into your bones. The shepherd isn't angry. He's not muttering about inconvenience. He is delighted. There is no punishment, no scolding, only celebration. Because the kingdom of heaven is about recovery, not reprimand. It's not just about finding, it's about carrying. In ancient Jewish tradition, shepherds were sometimes seen as lowly, even suspect. Yet here, Jesus elevates the image, placing himself in it. He becomes the good shepherd, and the parable becomes a living prophecy of his mission. And still some argue the parable is merely metaphorical, that Jesus meant only to illustrate God's general mercy. But others point to this as one of the most direct windows into the Messiah's heart. He doesn't just accept the lost, he seeks them. Here's a quiet curiosity in some early Christian texts. The image of the shepherd carrying a sheep appears again and again, not just in words, but in art. A gentle Jesus with a lamb draped around his neck, walking through eternity with unhurried steps. That's you tonight. Whether you feel lost or not, whether you know how far you've wandered, you are being carried. You might feel like you're too much trouble, that you slipped too far for too long, but that's not how the shepherd sees you. To him, you're not a liability. You're the reason he left the 99. And in this moment, on this quiet night, the stars above you shimmer with that truth. He came for you, and not just once, not just long ago, again and again and again, until you are found and held and whole. There's another layer here, one not often preached from pulpits. When the shepherd returns, Jesus says he calls his friends and neighbors and says, rejoice with me. Did you catch that? He brings others into the celebration, which means your restoration isn't just personal, it's communal. Heaven throws a party when the lost are found. That includes you. Right now, even now, if you've drifted from hope, or dulled to prayer, or felt too numb to believe your soul is being gathered again, quietly, fully. A soft joke, perhaps God's search and rescue team has a 100% success rate and he doesn't need a GPS. He only needs love. And he has that in full. There's also something the parable doesn't say. It never tells us how the sheep got lost. Was it distracted? Was it curious? Did it simply fall behind? None of that matters. Jesus doesn't condition the rescue on reasons. He simply rescues. A quiet theological tension lies here. If God is sovereign, why would one sheep stray at all? Some argue that this reflects divine respect for human agency, that we are not coerced but pursued. Others suggest the wandering is part of the story God uses to awaken the heart. Either way, the love doesn't change. It never has. So rest easy, sheep of the valley. Your shepherd knows the land well. He knows the wolves that never quite howl. He knows the hidden thorns, the steep descents, the places where you lost your footing. And still he comes. And still he carries. Tonight you may not feel movement. You may not even be able to whisper a prayer. But the shepherd hears your silence. And in that silence he sings. The path beneath your feet softens now, less field, more memory. A road leads toward a house at the edge of dusk. You smell smoke from a distant fire, and something sweet, like roasting figs. The wind carries the scent of home, but also of heartbreak. You're arriving not as a guest, but as the watcher of a reunion long foretold. A father stands at the gate, and the road stretches out to the horizon. You know this parable, well, everyone does. The prodigal son, the wayward heir. But what if this story is not just about return, but about revelation? What if buried within it is a prophecy that has echoed since Eden? Jesus says a man had 2 sons. Already it feels like a setup, doesn't it? One remains, one runs. But here's the quiet surprise, both are lost. One loses himself in the world. The other loses himself in his bitterness. And the father, he waits in both directions. Some believe this parable is merely about forgiveness. Others say it's about the Jewish-Gentile relationship, one group far off returning home. Still, others insist it's a prophetic outline of Israel's exile and redemption. But look closer, and you'll see something even more personal. It's about the divine ache of love, the kind that watches the road every evening, the kind that counts footsteps in the dust, the kind that runs when it sees you coming, even when you're still far off. You stand beside the Father now. His eyes scan the horizon. He says nothing, but hope radiates from him like light from an oil lamp. You feel it, the love that doesn't wait for a speech, the mercy that doesn't demand an apology. When the son appears dusty thinner, rehearsing his shame, the Father doesn't even let him finish. He wraps him in robes, places a ring on his finger, calls for a feast. This isn't just grace, it's prophecy. It's the story of humanity being welcomed home after a long, reckless exile. In some apocryphal teachings, there's a belief that the Messiah will come not only to reign, but to restore what was scattered. That when Adam and Eve were exiled, a divine sadness settled into the soil of the world, and that every return, every homecoming rewrites that moment. This parable rewrites Eden, not with angels and swords, but with sandals and supper. And what about the elder brother? His bitterness surprises you. He refuses to celebrate. He's been faithful, yes, but not free. He obeyed, but never rejoiced. His resentment reveals a heart more distant than his brother's ever was. And the Father, he pleads with him too. Again, prophecy. Because God doesn't only seek the lost, he seeks the hardened. He doesn't just run after the rebel. He walks out to the bitter, the bruised, the proud. No child is too far. No child is too near to forget the Father's voice. A soft joke. If the prodigal son were you, your speech would have been 20 slides long with bullet points, and the Father still would have cut you off halfway to kiss your forehead. And that's the kind of love we forget to expect. Here's something else hidden in this tale. Jesus never tells us whether the older brother goes in. The story ends open. Why? Because it's a parable of prophecy still unfolding. You are writing the ending. Every day, every choice you walk toward one side of the house or the other. But whichever you choose, the Father stands in the doorway, not judging, waiting. Here's a lesser-known curiosity: the robe, the ring, the shoes. They aren't just signs of welcome. They are legal restorations. In that culture, these items marked full reintegration into the family. No probation, no half status, full sonship. The son didn't just return, he was restored. And that's the deeper prophetic thread. Jesus isn't offering forgiveness like a band-aid. He's offering inheritance, identity, rebirth. Some scholars argue this parable also mirrors Israel's hope, lost in exile, waiting to come home, unsure if they'll be welcomed. Others say it mirrors all of us, every soul that's ever tried to make it on its own. But tonight it mirrors you. You who may have wandered through cynicism, distraction, self-reliance, numbness. Or you who stayed behind doing all the right things but secretly growing cold. The Father walks to both. You don't have to earn your place back. You just have to let yourself be found. Let the robe fall across your shoulders. Let the sandals remind you you are meant to walk in grace again. Let the music of the feast begin to play softly in the background of your mind. There's no punishment waiting, only a party, because you've come home, and heaven never stops celebrating that. The fields are still, the feast has faded, and the path now narrows. You walk alone through a stretch of quiet land where no footsteps seem to follow, and every stone seems to hold a secret. Then ahead, something glimmers beneath the soil. You kneel, you brush aside dirt, roots, time, and there it is. A treasure, buried, hidden, forgotten by others, but not by you. Jesus tells it plainly, almost as if in passing, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and in his joy, went and sold all he had and bought that field. That's it, one verse. But within it, a world. This isn't just a story about sacrifice. It's a parable of recognition, and a quiet prophecy about the kind of heart that sees divine worth where others see only weeds. Most people would walk right over this field. It's not grand, it's not marked, it doesn't shimmer in the sunlight. It looks like 100 others. But not to this man, and not to you, because you've started to see what's hidden. You've learned to notice the whisper, And here's the first secret: the treasure was already there. The kingdom is not something you summon, it is something you uncover. Some theologians suggest the man in the story represents Jesus himself, who gave everything to redeem the field, the world, in order to claim the treasure, humanity. Others say the man is the believer willing to trade all lesser things for the sake of eternity. Both interpretations breathe with prophecy. Both point to a love that doesn't just give, it gives joyfully. That joy is important. The man doesn't sell everything out of obligation or fear. He does it with delight. Because when you've glimpsed heaven, really glimpsed it, nothing else seems as heavy. Even loss feels like lightness. And still there's a mystery: why re-hide the treasure? It seems odd. He finds it, and then buries it again. Some say it's a legal move, ensuring he can buy the field without debate. Others whisper of deeper truth: some things must be hidden before they're fully yours. Not out of deception, but devotion. Maybe the kingdom is like that. Something you glimpse, then bury in your heart, knowing it's worth everything even before the world sees it. There's a lesser-known tradition in early Jewish writings that treasures were often hidden in fields during times of war or invasion. Families would bury their gold or scrolls hoping to return one day. Most never did. Which means every treasure was a story, a life interrupted, a hope frozen in time. So when the man in the parable finds this treasure, he's also finding history. He's discovering someone else's longing, perhaps even a longing God placed there from the beginning. Some biblical scholars connect this parable to Daniel's prophecy of a hidden kingdom, a stone not cut by human hands, rising silently to fill the earth. A quiet revolution planted in ordinary soil. And you are the field. Yes, you. Within you is something ancient and buried. A treasure placed there not by chance but by intention. Maybe no one else sees it. Maybe you've walked over yourself 1,000 times, never pausing to dig. But tonight, you do. You uncover it, and you begin to understand you are both the seeker and the sought. There's a soft joke here too: if the treasure had Wi-Fi, someone would have found it sooner. But treasures of the Spirit don't ping, they whisper. And they wait for souls like yours. Jesus doesn't describe the treasure's contents. He leaves it undefined, which is the beauty of it. For some, the kingdom is the promise of belonging. For others, peace. For others still, it's the joy of being known. Whatever it is, you'll know when you find it. 'Cause it will cost you everything and still feel like a bargain. There's a quiet ache in the trade. You may have to let go of pride habits, fear control. You may have to let friendships change, allow your heart to soften, loosen your grip on certainty. But you'll do it with joy. Because once you've seen what's hidden, you can't go back to pretending it's not there. Here's another gentle twist: the man doesn't just buy the treasure. He buys the whole field. Thorns and all. And that's what Jesus does with you. He doesn't purchase the shiny parts, the polished moments. He buys the full field, the regrets, the forgotten corners, the stories you buried and hoped no one would find. He wants the whole you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the treasure he came looking for. So tonight, as you lie still and quiet, know this: there is a field inside you. And there is treasure. And someone has given everything to make it his. You're still in the field, the air now thick with golden quiet. But something has shifted. The treasure has settled into your awareness, but nearby, like a second echo, there's something else glinting in the sand. You reach for it without thinking. It's smooth, round, weighty. A pearl. Not just any pearl, the kind divers dream about. A pearl worth everything. Jesus says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it." If the hidden treasure was a surprise, this is a search. This merchant isn't stumbling through a field. He's been looking deliberately, professionally, with trained eyes and calloused hands. And when he finds what he's been longing for, he doesn't negotiate. He gives all. This isn't impulse, it's revelation. It's not a gamble, it's conviction. Some scholars believe this parable is a companion to the hidden treasure. Where that man discovers something unexpected, this man knows what he's looking for and recognizes its worth instantly. That's the first quiet prophecy here. The kingdom is not only found by accident, it is found by longing. Longing you may not have words for. Longing that makes you restless in the night. Longing that lives behind your accomplishments, behind your laughter, behind your sighs. This merchant has been on that kind of search. And the pearl, it holds eternity in its sheen. Here's a lesser-known curiosity: in ancient times, pearls were rarer and more valuable than gold. Harvested at great risk from dangerous waters, they were prized in Eastern cultures as the most perfect natural gem, formed not by carving or polishing, but by endurance. A pearl is a wound that healed beautifully. That's not just metaphor. That's prophecy. Because if the kingdom is like a pearl, then it comes not by force, but by formation. And maybe you're the pearl too. Maybe all those years of irritation, the sand in the shell, the ache you couldn't explain, have been turning into something beautiful in secret. Maybe God's been shaping treasure within you through every trial. Here's where some scholars argue, is the merchant God seeking us? Or are we the merchant seeking the kingdom? The answer might be both. If God is the merchant, then you are the pearl of great price, the one he sought through incarnation, the one he purchased with everything, even his own son's life. If you are the merchant, then the kingdom is the pearl worth your time, your comfort, your reputation, your certainty. Either way, love gives all. And here's the quiet elegance of this parable. There's no resentment in the trade. The merchant doesn't hesitate. He doesn't bargain. He doesn't ask for a payment plan. He knows. And that's the gentle spiritual ache, isn't it? You may not know how to explain the kingdom, but you know when you see it. When it moves through a scripture line that somehow feels alive. When it whispers behind a moment of forgiveness you thought you couldn't give. When it settles around you in prayer like warmth from a blanket. You just know. Another soft layer, pearls are not mentioned often in Jewish scripture. But in the book of Revelation, the gates of the New Jerusalem are described as 12 pearls, each gate one solid pearl. Which means this parable, it's not just about now. It's a whisper of the future. Every time you choose the kingdom when you love instead of retaliate, when you worship in doubt, when you rest instead of strive, you step closer to that pearled gate. And perhaps that gate is not just at the end of time. Perhaps it's also the threshold of your soul tonight. You are the one seeking. You are the one being sought. And every moment of surrender is another step towards something too beautiful for language. Here's a soft joke to cradle as you drift. Pearls come from oysters. And let's be honest, God uses the ugliest packages to deliver the prettiest promises. And maybe that's why the kingdom feels so strange sometimes. Because it doesn't come wrapped in gold. It comes wrapped in fishermen and shepherds, in prayer and hunger, in broken people being made whole. And the only price is everything. But everything, when you compare it to the pearl, is nothing at all. So tonight in this hush, let the longing in you settle. Let the seeking turn to finding. Let the finding turn to joy. Because the pearl is here. And somehow, even if you didn't know until this very moment, you've been searching for it all your life. The pearl fades from your palm like a dream dissolving at dawn, and you begin walking again, barefoot, soft steps over sand-smoothed stone. The sea is near now. You hear the water before you see it. And when you do, it's vast, deep, and dark, stretching far beyond what your eyes can measure. On its shore, fishermen work in quiet rhythm, their nets heavy, their backs bent in practiced grace. You watch as they drag their nets toward land, not sorting as they gather, but collecting everything. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. It's a parable few quote before bed, and yet here you are at the water's edge, watching prophecy unfold. This is not just a story about fish. It's a quiet unveiling of divine judgment. Not thunderous or cruel, but inevitable. A sorting. And it begins as all things divine do in silence. The net moves unseen. The fish don't panic. There is no sudden splash of alarm. The gathering is slow, patient, total. It's a picture of the world, this net, this sea. All of humanity swept together by time drawn upward for something greater than itself. Some scholars argue that this parable is about the end of the age, when the righteous and the wicked will be separated. Others say it speaks more to the nature of the church. Many will be drawn in, but not all will remain. Either way, the message is not about fear. It's about discernment, and about the kingdom's all-encompassing reach. A lesser-known curiosity in Hebrew thought the sea often represented chaos and nations. When Jesus speaks of fishing, especially here, he's also invoking the idea of gathering people from all tribes and tongues, bringing order from the wild waters. The net then is not just judgment, it's mercy first. It doesn't discriminate on entry, it welcomes all. The sorting comes later, and here's the soft ache in that God allows time. Time to swim, time to change, time to turn. But he also promises that time will not go on forever. You see the fishermen now sitting on the rocks, sorting with calm hands. They are not angry, they are focused. Some fish are kept, others returned. The process isn't cruel, it's just necessary. Jesus ends the parable with words that stir discomfort. This is how it will be at the end of the age. It's his clearest link to the future, yet a whisper of final things. But here's the mystery tucked inside the metaphor. What makes a fish good? What makes another bad? He never says. He leaves the sorting unclarified, which might be the point. Because you, beloved listener, are not the one holding the net. You are the one being drawn. You are not asked to decide who's worthy, only to live as if you are ready. Ready to be lifted from the depths into light. Here's a softer layer still. Some early Christian writers saw this parable as encouragement that no one is missed, that the net of God's kingdom will reach farther and deeper than anyone expects. No person too hidden, no life too tangled. Even now, as you lay still, there is a line from heaven reaching through your waters, pulling you gently. And there's a soft joke tucked into the tension. If you're worried about being a bad fish, the fact that you're even wondering probably makes you a better one than you think. Because the kingdom isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Which way are you swimming? Toward the light, toward the truth, toward home. Even if slowly, that's enough. There's also a callback here to the very first disciples. Fishermen called not to catch sea life, but souls. Jesus told them, "I will make you fishers of men." Now in this parable, he shows the fullness of what that means. Their nets, their lives, their witness part of the great gathering. And so is yours. You may never preach, you may never teach, but your kindness is a net. Your prayers are a net. Your faith, even the trembling parts, is a net. The kingdom moves not by thunder, but by threads. And all the while God watches the shore, waiting, sorting, smiling, because his net never tears, and his mercy gathers more than anyone expects. So let yourself be caught. Let your soul drift upward toward the surface, toward the hands that separate not with vengeance, but with vision. And know this, there's a place for you in the basket, a place prepared before the waters ever formed. You are not lost in the sea. You are seen. You are selected. You are safe. The sea fades behind you, now its waves replaced by the rhythmic sound of footsteps on gravel. You walk alongside workers, men and women wiping sweat from their brows, the sun catching in their hair, their shadows stretching long across the path. They look tired but content. Until that is, they hear the call. The master has returned. The wages are being handed out. And what happens next confuses everyone, especially those who arrived early. Jesus tells it like this. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agrees to pay them a denarius for the day and sends them out. Hours pass. He hires more. At the 3rd hour, the 6th, the 9th, even the 11th, just an hour before quitting time. Then evening comes and he pays them all the same. And just like that, we're in the middle of a holy scandal. The early workers grumble. We bore the heat, the burden. How can they who barely worked receive what we did? The landowner responds, "Didn't you agree to what I gave you? Am I not allowed to be generous?" And there it is again. The quiet prophecy. The kingdom is not merit-based. It is grace-based. It doesn't operate on wages, it operates on wonder. Some scholars suggest this parable speaks to Jews and Gentiles, those who followed God from the beginning versus those called later. Others believe it's about deathbed conversions, the hope for those who come late to faith. But beyond all these layers is this simple, unsettling truth. God is not fair. He is good. And goodness, real divine goodness, often feels unfair to our striving hearts. You watch now as the 11th hour workers stare at their coins in disbelief. They didn't expect this. Some even look guilty. But the master smiles not because they earned it, but because they were chosen. Here's a spiritual curiosity in Jewish culture. The denarius wasn't just a coin. It represented a full day's provision. Enough for the day. The exact amount in the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. The parable whispers that no matter when you arrive, God gives you all of him. There are no half portions in heaven. There's a soft joke in the air too. If God ran a business, the accountants would quit by lunchtime. Because this kingdom isn't run on charts. It's run on compassion. That means the spiritual overachiever and the last-minute believer stand shoulder to shoulder in grace. And you don't have to prove your worth here, only receive. There's a quiet ache in that, especially for those of us who've tried so hard, who've kept score, who've measured our prayers, our fasting, our giving. But the vineyard's master reminds you, you were not hired to compete. You were hired to belong. Some theologians argue that this parable is also about God's timing, how he calls people at different hours in their lives, each one valuable, each one seen. If you're in your later seasons and feel you've come late to the work of faith, take heart. You are not late. You are right on time. The final hour may be short, but the reward is the same. And perhaps this is the part that stings. We don't mind mercy for others until it costs us our pride. The early workers wanted to feel superior, they wanted more. But the master isn't moved by math, he's moved by love. You see it now, don't you? This parable is less about labor and more about the laborers' hearts. The grumbling, the entitlement, the quiet bitterness that grows when grace is given freely. But the master invites everyone to joy. Take what is yours, he says, and go in peace. He's not dismissing them. He's releasing them from comparison, from resentment, from the lie that God's love is earned. Let that release fall over you now. You are not in a race for righteousness. You are in a vineyard of belonging. Let others receive mercy and rejoice. Let your heart grow soft with it. Let your clenched hands open. And know this in the kingdom, the last can be first. And the first still loved, still rewarded, still home. Because God isn't looking for the best workers. He's looking for hearts that will stay. So tonight, lay down the ledger, unclench your soul, and let the coin of grace rest quietly in your palm. Night is beginning to settle in full now. The sky deepens to indigo. The stars blink awake one by one, and the air cools as you enter a quiet courtyard. Lanterns flicker against old stone walls. A hush falls over the scene, and you sense the weight of anticipation, like something sacred is about to begin. Before you are 10, young women virgins, Jesus calls them, awaiting the arrival of a bridegroom. Each holds a lamp, each seems ready. But time stretches, midnight approaches, and then the cry goes up, here comes the bridegroom. They all rise, but only 5 have enough oil. The others' flames flicker, dim die. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. But 5 were foolish and 5 were wise. This is not just a tale of preparedness. It is a soft, glowing prophecy of vigilance, spiritual readiness, not out of fear, but devotion. The lamps represent our light. The oil, that's the deeper mystery. It's not mere belief, not busyness, it's intimacy. The wise bring extra oil, quiet faith, a reservoir. The foolish, they bring just enough to appear ready, but not enough to endure. Some scholars say this parable speaks of Christ's second coming, that it reflects the final moment when appearances fall away and only true readiness remains. Others suggest it symbolizes the quiet condition of the soul, how some hearts carry deep flame, while others rely on borrowed light. And there it is, the oil can't be shared. The foolish say, give us some of your oil, but the wise reply gently, there may not be enough for both of us. A subtle, tender ache lives in that moment, because spiritual depth can't be transferred. You can't inherit someone else's relationship with God. You can't borrow belief when the hour grows late. You must bring your own oil. Tonight, you hold that lamp in your hands. Its base is warm. The flame inside flickers steady and soft. How much oil is there? Not in your rituals, not in your good deeds, but in your closeness. Do you know the bridegroom's voice? Do you long for his arrival? Or have you merely rehearsed the motions? There's a lesser-known detail in ancient Jewish wedding traditions. The bridegroom often came unexpectedly, usually at night. His arrival was part celebration, part test. Those who truly loved him stayed alert. The ones just attending for the ceremony, they dozed off. All 10 women in the parable fall asleep, but only 5 are ready when the call comes. This isn't about staying awake physically. It's about keeping your soul lit when the world gets dark. You might smile here, a soft joke forming modern translation. Don't run out of battery at the worst moment. But in spiritual terms, it's even gentler. Don't run out of presence, because there will be a moment when the door opens. And in that moment, the only question will be, did your light survive the waiting? Jesus doesn't end this parable with a celebration. He ends it with a closed door. The foolish return lamps in hand, but it's too late. They knock saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. And he answers with heartbreaking finality, truly I tell you, I don't know you. It's the only parable where the kingdom ends in separation between those who look ready and those who are. It's not cruel. It's clear, because the kingdom isn't accessed by resemblance. It's entered by relationship. You begin to feel it now, that pull toward awareness. That gentle nudge to check the oil, to hold your spirit up to the flame. Are you burning from memory or from real current fire? Is your lamp something you maintain or something you display? There's a quiet prophecy here too, one almost never preached. The bridegroom does arrive. The wedding does begin. The celebration is real, which means your waiting isn't in vain. The delay is part of the love story. And the door, it's not closed yet. You are still breathing, still holding your lamp, still able to lean in to tend the flame. And maybe tonight, this very night, is your chance to trim the wick and pour the oil, to pray without noise, to surrender without drama, to refill what you thought was long spent. So when the cry comes not of panic but of promise, you will rise without fear. And your light will not just flicker, it will guide you into joy. The last notes of the wedding feast echo behind you, laughter, footsteps, the faint ringing of flutes, and the world grows still again. You find yourself now in the outer halls of a grand estate. The doors have closed. The guests are inside. But nearby a servant stands alone, eyes fixed on the horizon, fingers curled tightly around a small bundle of silver. 3 servants, 3 gifts, 3 destinies. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1 each according to his ability. Then he left. No instructions, no conditions, just trust. A talent wasn't skill in the modern sense, it was a measure of weight, often silver. 1 talent equaled years of wages. What these servants receive is more than responsibility. It's prophecy in currency form. The first 2 act swiftly. They double what they've been given. But the third, he buries his talent, hides it, protects it with fear. And when the master returns, joy for the first 2, grief for the third. You can feel the tension already. This isn't just about money. It's about what you do with what heaven placed in your hands. Some scholars argue that this parable is a lesson in faithfulness. Others believe it's a judgment narrative revealing how God will assess lives not based on how much was given, but how deeply it was trusted. And some read it even more personally, a quiet mirror of fear and potential. The servant who buried his gift wasn't lazy. He was afraid. He said, "I knew you were a hard man, so I hid what you gave me." You hear that he misunderstood the master. He imagined him cruel, exacting. And that lie about the nature of the master is what paralyzed him. It always begins there. The enemy doesn't need to steal your gift, only distort your view of the one who gave it. But the first 2, they weren't afraid. They knew the master is generous, and so they responded with courageous stewardship. Here's a softer layer: the talents weren't randomly assigned, each according to his ability, Jesus says, which means the master knew exactly what they could handle. He didn't overload them. He didn't test them unfairly. He entrusted them intimately, which leads to a quiet spiritual truth: your portion is perfectly measured for your mission. And your call is not to compare, but to multiply. There's a lesser-known curiosity tucked in here too. In ancient rabbinic tradition, burying something was seen as a way to protect its value, especially in uncertain times. It was considered safe. But safety is not the language of the kingdom. Faith is, you hold your own gift now: talent, time, tenderness, wisdom, prayer. You may think it's small. You may even think you've missed your moment. But if it's still in your hands, it's still in play. You are not asked to be impressive. You are asked to be faithful. Jesus says the master responds with joy to those who multiplied. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many. Not successful, not perfect. Faithful. That word echoes softly into your chest tonight. Maybe it's a question: have you buried what God gave you? Not out of rebellion, but out of fear. If so, there's still time to dig it up, to uncover it, to trust again, to try again. Some theologians point out that this parable isn't just about judgment at the end of time, it's about participating in the kingdom now. The master goes away, but his work continues through you. You are a co-creator with heaven. Your voice, your kindness, your story, these are not small things. They are investments. They are seeds. And God longs to say to you one day, maybe even now, enter into the joy of your master. That joy, it isn't just at the finish line. It starts the moment you begin to use what's been given, even trembling, even slowly. Here's a soft joke for the night. If heaven were grading you, it wouldn't be ABC, it'd be, did you try and did you bury it? God's grading curve bends toward mercy. But he still wants to see a return. Not for his sake, for yours. Because the only thing sadder than losing something is never discovering what it could have become. So tonight, take a breath, unclench the soil around your gift, dust it off. And even if you only have 1 talent, let it shine, let it grow, let it live. Dawn is just beginning to stretch across the hills, gold brushing the horizon like a promise. You follow a narrow path toward a tree that stands alone, its branches wide, its leaves trembling gently in the morning breeze. It's not a grand tree, not tall or flowering, but something about it feels watched. You recognize it. It's a fig tree, and it is more than it appears. Jesus once pointed to such a tree and said, "Learn the lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near." But this wasn't just about seasons. This was prophecy pressed gently into a branch. The fig tree has always been a symbol in Scripture of Israel of blessing of timing. When Jesus speaks of it, he's not giving a gardening tip. He's offering a clock. Not one made of gears and hands, but of signs and awakenings. Some scholars believe the fig tree represents the rebirth of Israel as a nation, marking the countdown to divine fulfillment. Others say it refers more broadly to spiritual readiness, the signs that precede transformation. Either way, the fig tree speaks quietly, but it always speaks. And not just in parables. There's another fig tree in the Gospels, the one Jesus curses. It's full of leaves but bears no fruit. A strange moment unless you see the silent prophecy within it. The tree is performing. It looks alive, but it has nothing to offer. Jesus is making a statement not of rage but of warning. That appearance without substance is a kind of spiritual fraud. That the kingdom isn't interested in leafy performance. It wants fruit. And fruit, unlike leaves, takes time, takes root, takes surrender. You walk around the tree now, watching the breeze ripple through its branches. It stands in tension between symbol and story, between life and judgment. Jesus said this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. He's not talking about dates on a calendar. He's talking about signs, spiritual patterns blooming like spring. Can you see them? Can you feel something stirring in the world around you? A holy unease, a quiet acceleration. The fig tree says, pay attention. Here's a lesser-known curiosity. In ancient times, fig trees were planted near vineyards to act as early indicators of seasonal change. If the fig tree budded, the vineyard would soon blossom. So when Jesus says, watch the fig tree, he's not just pointing to one tree. He's saying, watch the world. Because the kingdom moves like a season, not overnight, but slowly, softly, until one day the landscape is entirely changed. Some theologians debate whether Jesus' fig tree prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD with the fall of Jerusalem, or whether it still points to the end of the age. But either way, it carries a call. Stay awake. Because God's timing doesn't move with our clocks. It moves with readiness. And readiness is rarely loud. It looks like daily obedience, like oil in a lamp, like a heart not trying to predict the moment, but to prepare for it. Here's a soft joke to carry with you. If fig trees had email, they'd never tell you when they're about to bloom. They'd just quietly grow until you're late to the harvest. So don't wait for a memo, just stay near the tree. Some rabbis believed that when the Messiah comes, the fig tree would blossom again in Eden, that the curse of Adam would be reversed where it began. Under a tree? Maybe that's why Jesus returns to the image. Because the fig tree has always been more than bark and branches. It's a signal, a whisper, a holy clock. And tonight, or rather this gentle morning within the story, you are standing beneath it. And your own heart is part of its cycle. Are you showing leaves but no fruit? Are you blossoming quietly in places no one sees? Wherever you are in the process, the lesson is the same. The time is near. Not with fear, not with frenzy, but with a sacred invitation to be ready, to bloom in season, to stay rooted in love. Because when the fig tree speaks, the wise begin to listen. The path shifts again, wider now, winding down toward a valley dappled in early morning light. You walk slowly, the air warming with each step, when you notice something unusual, a man on the roadside, bloody and barely conscious. His clothes are torn. His eyes search the sky, then fall shut. Others walk past, but one man stops. A Samaritan. You know this story. Everyone does. But tonight, or perhaps this morning, you listen for what's beneath it. Jesus says a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. It could have been anyone. He's stripped, left half dead, and his identity unspoken. A priest passes, a Levite too. Men of God, teachers of truth. They see and cross to the other side. Then comes the Samaritan, an outsider, a theological enemy, an unlikely hero, and he kneels. He touches the wounds. He pours oil and wine. He lifts the man and pays for his care. And Jesus asks, which of these was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Not who belonged, but who loved. This isn't just a story of kindness. It's a silent prophecy of expansion of the kingdom, stretching beyond lines, beyond traditions, beyond comfort. Some scholars see this parable as a subtle foreshadowing of the gospel to the Gentiles. Others suggest it reflects the way Jesus too was rejected by the religious elite, and yet became the healer of the wounded. And some those who look very closely believe Jesus is speaking of himself. The Good Samaritan is the Christ figure, the one despised, yet the one who stops. You begin to feel it. The oil and wine poured into wounds are not random details. Oil used for anointing, wine used in covenant. Together they heal. And the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, it was real and dangerous, winding steep a place known for its shadows, which makes this parable not just symbolic but specific. The man in the ditch is every soul fallen between holy places, every person broken between what was and what might be. And the Samaritan, he doesn't ask how it happened. He doesn't scold. He doesn't lecture. He simply loves. You might feel a quiet ache here, because deep down we all want that kind of love, the kind that lifts without condition, binds without question, stays through the night. A lesser-known curiosity in early Christian art, this parable was often depicted with the Samaritan carrying the man on his own back, not just his animal. The artists were making a statement about burden, about mercy, about the cost of real compassion. And what of the inn? The Samaritan takes the man there, pays for his recovery, and promises to return. Another soft prophecy? Jesus doesn't just rescue us, he entrusts us to care, to growth, to time, and he promises he will return. Some theologians say the inn is the church, the place of recovery between rescue and resurrection. Others say it's the world itself, charged now with the duty to care for those left bleeding. And perhaps the innkeeper was you. Maybe you're the one being asked to make room, to tend to stay awake a little longer than you planned. Because the kingdom isn't just in the heroics. It's in the healing. It's in the day after, the bandages, the follow-up visit, the patient, persistent mercy that doesn't always get applauded. You may smile here quietly. If the Samaritan had waited for a background check, the man would have died. But the kingdom doesn't require paperwork to pour out compassion. It requires presence. And perhaps as you lie here listening, your own wounds are whispering. You've been the one in the ditch. You've also passed by others. And tonight Christ walks up the road again, not in robes but in dusty sandals. His hands carry healing. His eyes see you. And he stops. Not to ask what happened, but to help. To bind. To carry, to pay. Because the kingdom of God isn't always fire and glory. Sometimes it's a tired stranger with a steady hand. Sometimes it's wine and oil. Sometimes it's one more breath, one more step, one more person refusing to look away. So whether you're the wounded or the one asked to help them, know this. The road may be long, but no one is alone on it. Not when the Samaritan still walks. You rise from the roadside slowly, the dust still clinging to your clothes, the image of mercy lingering in your heart. The sun now casts long, warm beams across the land, painting everything in gold. But soon, another figure enters your view. He walks fast with a smile on his lips and full barns on his mind. He's planning, dreaming, counting. Jesus says the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And so the man builds bigger barns. He stores everything. He looks over his wealth and says, "Soul, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God says to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." And just like that, the parable ends. No fire, no plague, just the quiet end of assumed control. This parable is often called the rich fool. But beneath the warning, there's something deeper, a gentle, devastating prophecy about misplaced security. The man isn't judged for his wealth. He's judged for his illusion. He thought he owned the time ahead. He mistook provision for permission. Some scholars believe Jesus told this parable as a response to someone asking him to settle an inheritance dispute. In doing so, he shifted the conversation from fairness to eternity. Because the kingdom doesn't measure wealth in storage. It measures it in surrender. You feel it now, don't you? That soft warning. Not against riches, but against forgetting that life is a breath. That eternity doesn't ask for account balances, it asks for accountability. And this man, he never shared, he never thanked, he never paused. He spoke only to himself. "I will do this. I will tear down, I will store, I will say." But he never asked, "Lord, what should I do?" He never once looked beyond his own reflection. You glance now at the barns, massive, gleaming, sealed tight. But you can't take them with you. You can't store peace. You can't stockpile joy. And you certainly can't hoard eternity. A lesser-known curiosity in the ancient world, food surpluses were often seen as blessings, but also as tests. How a person used their abundance revealed their understanding of divine trust. And here the man fails the test not by having wealth, but by isolating it from purpose. There's a soft joke here if you make a spreadsheet for your soul. Heaven's not checking the formulas, it's reading the margin notes. And perhaps your soul's been scribbling them lately. Moments you meant to give more. Say more. Be more present. But the barns kept calling. It's easy to fall into their comfort. They feel safe. They feel smart. But the parable's whisper is this: there is no safety in things that cannot outlast your heartbeat. Jesus ends with a haunting line. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Rich toward God? What a phrase. What does it mean? It's not about tithes or temple taxes. It's about alignment. A heart tuned toward heaven. A life open-handed, not closed-fisted. To be rich toward God is to invest in what outlasts you: mercy, truth, kindness, time spent on souls instead of things. There's a theological debate here too. Is Jesus condemning wealth itself? Most agree no. Rather, he's exposing the spiritual blindness that often accompanies comfort. Because abundance without awareness can lead to amnesia. You forget who gave it. You forget who needs it. And eventually, you forget yourself. So tonight, or this golden morning in the parable's light, take inventory not of your barns, but of your heart. What are you building? What are you keeping? What will remain when the breath fades and the door opens? Here's the piece in the parable: you don't need bigger barns. You need deeper roots and richer trust, because the kingdom offers what no vault can hold, and the only wise investment is love. So loosen your grip, give generously, rest joyfully, and walk lightly, because eternity isn't waiting in the barn. It's waiting in the open. The golden fields give way to a wide stone courtyard, now silent and still beneath the morning sun. You hear the distant clink of coins, the rustle of robes, the low murmur of a crowd holding its breath. At the center stands a servant, shaking pale eyes wide with terror. His knees hit the ground. Before him a king sits in solemn silence. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. One man is brought forward owing 10,000 talents. It's an impossible debt, a laughable number. In today's terms, it would equal lifetimes of wages, more than he could ever repay, not in years, not in centuries. So the man begs, and the king forgives him, not delays the debt, not reduces it. He cancels it completely. But as the parable unfolds, the forgiven servant walks away from mercy and finds a fellow servant who owes him just 100 silver coins. And he grabs him, chokes him, demands payment. The other man begs, using almost the exact same words the first man used. But this time, there is no mercy. He throws the man in prison. And when the king hears, his mercy becomes judgment. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you? It's a parable of forgiveness, but not just horizontally. It's a prophetic warning about the gravity of grace received. Some scholars read this as a tale of hypocrisy. Others say it's a kingdom mirror, showing how mercy flows or doesn't from those who've been forgiven. And still others see it as a call to spiritual maturity. If God cancels your debts, how can you possibly hold someone else hostage for theirs? You feel it now, don't you? The quiet shame of the servant's coldness. He was forgiven something incalculable, but he couldn't forgive something small. Here's the hidden ache of the story. Both men use the same words: be patient with me, but only one was shown compassion. That's not a coincidence, it's a divine highlighter. The kingdom listens not only to our prayers, but to how we echo them for others. A lesser-known curiosity, 10,000 talents wasn't just a huge sum, it was more money than existed in circulation in most provinces at the time. The point isn't accounting, it's absurdity. The servant's debt is like saying he owed the sky. And yet, it's gone. No repayment plan, no shame. Just canceled. And still, he couldn't find that same mercy for a peer. Here's a soft joke for the moment. If forgiveness were tracked like credit scores, most of us would be flagged for suspicious generosity only once a year. But in heaven's economy, forgiveness isn't rare, it's required. Not to earn love, but to live in it. Jesus ends the parable with a hard truth. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. And there it is, the uncomfortable prophecy. Forgiveness is not optional in the kingdom. It's the currency. Some theologians wrestle with that ending. Is Jesus saying God's forgiveness is conditional? Others explain it's not about losing grace, but refusing to live in the reality of it. If we hoard mercy, we choke our own spirit. Because unforgiveness always builds a prison, and the first person locked inside is you. You sit now with this parable beside you. Maybe a name rises in your mind. Maybe an old wound long folded away. Maybe it's something small you've gripped too tightly, or something large you've buried so deeply you forgot it was there. Whatever it is, the King is watching, and he is not angry. He's inviting you to do for others what has been done for you, not because they deserve it, but because you didn't either. And yet, here you are, forgiven, free, whole. There's a powerful reversal here too. The first servant thought his forgiveness was private. but it became public when he failed to pass it on. Your forgiveness, too, is never meant to stay locked in your heart. It's meant to spill over, to become balm for someone else, to become peace where there was none. So tonight, or in this holy hush of morning, lay down your clenched judgment. Hold the mirror of mercy instead. Because the kingdom doesn't count how many times you've been wronged. It counts how many times you set someone free, and maybe tonight, that someone is you. The courtyard drifts behind you, now the air quiet, but charged like the pause between thunder and rain. You follow a narrow passage into a vineyard, vines twisting over stone walls, leaves trembling in anticipation. Ahead, 2 sons wait at the edge of a field. Their father has made a request. Go and work in my vineyard today. Jesus says there was a man who had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, "Son, go and work in the vineyard." The son said, "I will not," but later changed his mind and went. The second son said, "I will, sir," but he did not go. Then Jesus asks, which of the 2 did what his father wanted? It seems obvious, doesn't it? The one who did not, the one who promised. But beneath that simplicity lies a quiet, razor-sharp prophecy. It isn't about obedience alone, it's about how the kingdom responds to repentance. This parable is aimed squarely at the religious elite, those who said all the right words, but refused the heart of the message. And it's given in favor of those seen as outsiders, tax collectors, sinners, the ones who first said no, and then walked into mercy anyway. Some scholars say this parable reflects Israel's leadership rejecting Jesus, while the unexpected ones, the broken, the unworthy, respond with action. Others see it as a universal parable of the heart words, without change mean little in the vineyard of heaven. And you standing here now begin to see yourself in both sons. The one who said no, then felt the Spirit whisper. The one who said yes, then forgot the call. A lesser-known curiosity in rabbinic tradition, the vineyard often symbolizes not just work, but intimacy, God's closeness with his people. To be invited into the vineyard is to be drawn into divine partnership. So when the Father calls, he's not just giving orders. He's inviting his children into closeness. That's what makes the second son's lie sting more deeply. He appeared obedient, but his feet never moved. The Father didn't need politeness. He wanted presence. And so does God. You begin to hear the tension in your own life, the times you've said yes with your lips, but stayed still in spirit. The times you've nodded in prayer, but avoided the path that followed. Yet here's the mercy in this story. The first son changed his mind, and the kingdom leaves space for that. Repentance in God's economy is not weakness. It's movement, a returning, and the moment you turn, the vineyard opens. There's a soft joke here. Some of us are so good at agreeing with God in theory that we forget he's waiting for us down the path with a shovel and a vine. He's not looking for speeches, he's looking for steps. Some theologians say this parable is a warning against performative faith, the kind that nods in church but avoids the vineyard on Monday. Others say it's a divine reminder that initial rebellion is not final disqualification, because the kingdom is not for the perfect. It's for the willing, and even the formerly unwilling, especially them. You take a breath now, feel the soil beneath your feet. You are in the vineyard after all. It's not too late. You haven't missed your call. Even if your first answer was no, even if you wandered, doubted, delayed, the Father still wants you there. Still calls you son, still calls you daughter. Still trusts that the story isn't over. And perhaps that's the softest, strongest part of the parable. God believes you can still say yes and live it. So tonight or now, as your breath slows and the light fades, let your heart shift, not from guilt, but from love. Because the kingdom is not built by perfect promises. It is built by those who return. And the vineyard, it's always waiting. The vineyard narrows now into a shaded corridor of fig and olive trees. Light filters through the branches in soft gold fragments. You pass under an arch and find yourself standing in front of a great hall. Its doors stand wide open. Tables are being set. Garments shimmer. But something is off. Not everyone invited has arrived. Jesus tells another story. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sends out invitations, but the guests refuse to come. Again and again, one heads to his farm, another to his business. Still others seize the king's messengers, beat them, kill them. And so the king sends his servants into the streets. Invite anyone you find, he says. And soon the banquet is filled with guests, the good and the bad alike. This parable doesn't end there. The king enters to greet the guests and finds one man not wearing wedding clothes. And he says, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding garments?" The man is silent. And then he's cast out. A parable that begins with celebration ends in a whisper of judgment. This is not just a party story, it's a prophecy in fine linen. Some scholars believe the invited guests who refuse are the religious leaders of Jesus' day, those too busy, too proud, or too violent to accept God's call. Others say it's a broader tale of all humanity, how we often treat divine invitations with apathy. But then comes the twist. The outcasts, the overlooked, the strangers in the street. They're the ones who enter, not because they were worthy, but because they responded. You walk through the hall now. Tables are full. Laughter bubbles like wine. Bread is passed from hand to hand. These are not perfect people. They are present people. People who said yes. The wedding feast in Scripture always symbolizes the final union, heaven and earth Christ, and his people love eternal. But here it's not just an image of joy. It's also a question, will you come when invited? And not just in body, but in heart. There's a lesser-known curiosity in ancient Eastern wedding culture. The host often provided the garments. To show up without one wasn't just rude, it was a refusal of grace. Which changes everything? The man who lacked wedding clothes wasn't poor. He rejected the covering freely offered. He wanted access without transformation. And that's the soft ache in the story. God invites all, but he also asks you to dress for the occasion, to accept the grace, the cleansing, the preparation, because the kingdom doesn't want you as you perform. It wants you as you surrender. There's a gentle joke to smile at here. Showing up to heaven's banquet in your own outfit is like bringing a paper plate to a royal feast, well-meaning maybe, but deeply missing the point. Some theologians suggest the wedding garment symbolizes righteousness, a divine covering, woven not by works, but by grace. Others believe it's simply readiness, the inward change that results from accepting the invitation fully. Either way, the man without the garment did not forget. He refused, and his silence says it all. You sit with this now in the soft warmth of the feast. You're not asked to earn a place at the table, only to wear what's offered. The king invites you, even now, and the invitation comes not by trumpet, but by tenderness. You don't have to clean yourself first. You don't have to bring a gift. You only need to come hungry and willing to be changed. And here's the deeper whisper: the kingdom will be filled with unexpected guests. The ones we overlook, the ones who didn't look the part, the ones who came running when they heard there was a place for them. So tonight, or this eternal moment between time and sleep, ask yourself, have I said yes? And have I let myself be clothed in the mystery of mercy? Because the feast is real, and the table is set, and the king is waiting. You leave the wedding feast behind, its light and laughter echoing like a lullaby in the back of your mind. The path turns once more, and now you find yourself in a wide field beneath the sky's long gaze. Wheat sways gently in the wind, tall and golden. But look closer, and you'll see something else. Weeds. Almost identical at first, but not the same. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted, the weeds appeared too. The servants asked, should we pull them up? But the master said no. Let them grow together until the harvest. It's a strange command. Let the false grow alongside the true. Why? Because pulling the weeds too soon might damage the wheat. This parable is not just agricultural advice, it is a whispered prophecy of the end times. A picture of patience, a slow divine unraveling. Some scholars argue this parable addresses the problem of evil, why God allows both good and wicked people to coexist. Others see it as a call to discernment. Not everything that looks righteous is wheat. And others go deeper still, saying it is a quiet judgment on human impulse. We want to fix, to clean, to uproot. But God sees the field differently. He knows the roots are tangled. He knows the hearts are still growing. And he refuses to harm one soul in haste to correct another. You stand in the field now. The sun is warm, the breeze gentle, but beneath the soil the tension breathes. What is wheat? What is weed? You may not always know, but the master does. A lesser-known detail the word Jesus uses for weeds is zizanian, a plant called darnel. It looks just like wheat until the very end when its seeds turn black and poisonous. Only at the harvest do their differences fully appear. And this is the heart of the parable. Time reveals truth. Not loud declarations. Not quick judgment. Just time. Growth. Fruit. There's a soft joke to hold close. If you've ever sat in a church pew and wondered, am I wheat or weed? The fact that you care probably says enough. Because weeds don't worry about bearing fruit. They just blend in. But wheat leans toward the sun. Wheat listens. Wheat waits. Some theologians point out that the enemy in the parable doesn't destroy the field, he corrupts it subtly. That's often how evil moves, not with explosions, but with imitation. And that's why the parable feels personal. It's not just about others. It's about you, the field inside your heart, the places where wheat grows strong, and the places where weeds still whisper. But again, the master is patient. He knows which is which. He knows when to harvest, and he never rushes the process. Because the kingdom of heaven isn't a battlefield. It's a field of mercy, of waiting, of wisdom. Here's something even gentler. The harvest comes not with fire first, but with gathering. Jesus says the wheat is collected into his barn. Then the weeds are burned. The kingdom begins with preservation, not punishment. And tonight, as you lie still and feel the soft rustling of wheat around, you know this. You are not responsible for separating the good from the bad. You are responsible for growing, for leaning toward the light, for bearing fruit even when weeds surround you. Because your job is not to fix the field, it's to flourish in it. And when the time is right, the king will walk the rows. Not with a sword, but with eyes that see all. And he will know. He already knows. So let your roots go deep. Let your heart stay soft. Let the weeds grow if they must. You belong to the harvest, and the barn is waiting. The field fades behind you, the breeze of the wheat replaced by the scent of rain, distant but approaching. The sky darkens not with threat, but with something holy. The clouds pulse gently, silver-lined and alive with power. Then suddenly, you are in a boat. The wind picks up, the sea churns, and Jesus is asleep. You remember this moment, don't you? The disciples panic, the storm rages, water crashes over the sides, and Jesus sleeps head on a cushion unmoved by the chaos. They shake him, their voices shaking too. Lord, don't you care if we drown? He rises. He speaks. Peace, be still. And the storm obeys. This isn't just a miracle story. It's a prophetic parable wrapped in reality. A revelation of who Jesus truly is, not just a healer, not just a teacher, but the one whom even the wind and waves obey. Some scholars argue this moment is a living metaphor for the end times, when at last Christ will rise again and silence every storm. Others point to Old Testament echoes, Yahweh calming chaos in Genesis, or subduing Leviathan in Job. The sea has always symbolized disorder, danger, judgment. And here is Jesus standing over it like a quiet king. You stand in the boat now soaked and breathless. You feel the storm's breath. And you also feel the silence that follows. Because when Jesus speaks peace, it doesn't just stop the storm. It changes you. A lesser-known curiosity in Jewish tradition, only God had the authority to calm the sea. So when Jesus does it with a word, he isn't just protecting the disciples. He's revealing himself, not just as a messenger, but as the message. And still he asks them gently, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? That question is the parable. It's not about weather, it's about trust. Do you trust him when he sleeps? Do you believe in his presence, even when he doesn't feel active? You may smile here softly, because we all have storms like this. Internal ones, fears that rise in the dark, doubts that pour through cracks when we least expect. And sometimes it feels like God is asleep. But maybe that's the lesson. That divine silence is not divine absence. That peace doesn't come from the storm ending, it comes from knowing who's in your boat. Some theologians argue this story isn't about rescue, but authority. That Jesus is not reacting, he's revealing. The storm didn't surprise him. It was the setting for your awakening. The moment you realize you never needed calm water, you only needed him. And maybe, just maybe, the storm was allowed so the sleeping faith inside you would wake up too. Because fear makes noise, but faith listens. You take a breath now. The sea is calm. The boat rocks gently like a cradle on water. You look over the edge and see your reflection, not panicked but softened, changed. And in that reflection you see someone else, Jesus. Not distant, not angry, just present, perfectly present. The storm was never stronger than him, and neither is yours. Here's a quiet, tender joke. If Jesus takes naps during your storms, it's not because he's careless, it's because he knows the ending. And he wants you to trust that it's good. So tonight, or in this dreamlike moment between storms and sunrise, let your grip loosen on the edge of the boat. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the waves. Let your fear be named and then released, because he's still here, still speaking, still stronger than the storm. And his words are not just sound. They are shelter, peace, he says. Be still. And everything, including you, obeys. The sea grows still behind you, the echo of waves, now a memory soaked into your soul. You step onto solid ground again, dry, warm, familiar. A narrow path winds upward toward a town square where a small crowd gathers near a judge's bench. The people murmur, the air thick with expectation. But it's not the judge they've come to see. It's her, a widow, and she will not go away. Jesus says, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow who kept coming to him with the plea, "Grant me justice against my adversary." Again and again she comes. She knocks. She pleads. She refuses to be ignored. And though the judge is unjust, indifferent, unmoved, eventually he relents. Because this widow keeps bothering me, he says I will see that she gets justice so she won't wear me out with her coming. And Jesus turns to the listeners and whispers the real heart of the parable. If even this unjust judge gives in, how much more will God bring justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? This isn't a story about nagging your way into heaven. It's a prophetic portrait of persistent prayer. A divine reassurance God is not reluctant like the judge. He's ready. Some scholars say this parable reflects Israel's longing for justice, especially under Roman oppression. Others interpret it more spiritually. The widow represents the church longing for the return of the bridegroom, calling day and night. But there's also a tender personal level. You are the widow, or you've been her, carrying pain to God again and again, wondering if he hears, if he sees, if he'll ever act. And the parable doesn't dismiss your ache. It dignifies it. A lesser-known curiosity, widows in Jesus' time had very little power, no legal leverage, no status. She shouldn't even be in the courtroom. Her presence is a kind of protest, and so is your prayer. Every whispered help me when nothing changes. Every late-night tear in the dark. Every time you showed up with the same request, the same longing, the same silence from heaven. It matters. Not because you have to convince God, but because prayer keeps you connected. Jesus says, will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay long? But then he ends with a question, one that pierces more than any answer. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Will he find you still waiting? Still trusting? Still showing up? There's a soft joke here. If faith had a voice assistant, it would say, you've prayed this request 42 times. Would you like to try something new? But heaven doesn't tire. Heaven treasures the returning voice. God is not like the judge. He is not annoyed. He is not worn down. He is moved. Not by eloquence, but by endurance. And maybe that's the quiet prophecy of this parable. Justice may seem delayed, but it is never denied. The day is coming when every hidden pain will be answered, when every wrong will be reversed, when the cries of widows, the whispers of saints, the groans of the weary, all will be gathered, remembered, answered. But tonight your place is not in the courtroom's resolution. It's in the widow's footsteps. Steady, gentle, unyielding. Let that be your prayer posture now. Not polished, just persistent. You may not have power, but you have a voice. And in the kingdom, that is more than enough. So keep praying, keep knocking, keep hoping. Justice is on its way. And the judge is already listening. The judge's court fades like mist as you continue walking. The world seems to narrow with each step, and soon you find yourself standing before a gate, tall, wooden, ancient. To its left is a broad road, wide and smooth, filled with travelers, laughing, loud, unbothered. To its right, a narrow path, almost hidden, winding, quiet. Only a few walk there, heads bowed, steps steady. You pause. This is the moment Jesus spoke of. Enter through the narrow gate, he said. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. A parable without characters, just choices, just roads. And within it, a silent prophecy about the soul's direction and the difficulty of divine alignment. Some scholars argue this isn't merely about heaven and hell, but about the daily journey of discipleship. Others say it reflects the painful truth that the kingdom of God rarely aligns with popularity, because the broad road is easy, everyone's on it, but the narrow path it costs. It asks you to leave things behind: ego, pride, convenience, applause. You can't carry your whole life through the narrow gate. Only your heart. There's a lesser-known detail in ancient cities. Narrow gates were used to control what could pass through, particularly at night. You had to dismount to remove baggage, to humble yourself physically. And spiritually, the message is the same. You can't swagger through this door. You have to stoop. You have to let go. This gate isn't hidden from the world, but it's often ignored. Why? Because it doesn't dazzle. It doesn't promise comfort. It promises life, real life. But few find it, Jesus says. Not because it's hidden, but because we often don't want to look. You look now at both paths. The wide road calls with ease. the narrow one. It calls with truth. And somewhere deep within you know which one your soul longs for, even if your feet hesitate. Here's a soft joke to carry. If the kingdom had a billboard, it wouldn't say easy route this way. It would whisper, hard road ahead, beautiful ending guaranteed. That's what the narrow path offers. Not comfort, but clarity. Not crowds, but companionship. Because though few walk it, you are never alone. And here's the quiet surprise. The narrow road is not about restriction. It's about refinement. It strips away what doesn't serve you. It clarifies who you are. It makes you lighter, holier, more whole. Some theologians suggest that the narrow path is actually Jesus himself. That he is the gate, the way, the road. Which makes this more than a metaphor. It makes it an invitation. Not just to walk a certain way, but to walk with someone. And he walks slowly, so you can keep up. You don't have to rush this journey. You just have to be willing to leave behind what holds you back. To pass through the gate, not with fanfare, but with faith. So tonight, or here in the softness of your breath, consider, what are you carrying that won't fit through the narrow gate? What burdens have you mistaken for necessities? And what would it feel like to finally lay them down? Because the path is ready, the gate is open. And though it is small, it opens into a vast kingdom. So step forward, not with fear, but with trust. Because the road may be narrow, but the destination is wide with glory. The narrow road winds gently downward, now tracing the slope of a quiet hill. You follow its curve until you reach a small home, humble, sunlit, swept clean. Inside, a woman moves with care, her eyes scanning the room. She kneels near the floor, lifts a rug, peers under a stool. Her hands shake slightly. She has lost something. Something small, but precious. Jesus says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends, her neighbors, and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. This parable is not just about value, it is about being noticed. Even when you don't feel like you're missing from anyone's count. Some scholars link this story to the other two in Jesus' lost and found trilogy, the lost sheep, the lost son. Each one shows a different kind of disconnection. One wanders, one rebels, one is simply misplaced. And that's the woman's coin. It didn't run, it didn't rebel, it just got lost in the dust. And still she searches for it like it's irreplaceable. That's the quiet prophecy. You don't have to move for God to come looking for you. You don't have to shout. Your silence is still heard. Your stillness is still seen. A lesser-known curiosity, the Greek word for coin used here, is drachma, a day's wage. But some scholars believe the coin might have been part of a dowry headdress, a row of 10 coins worn across the forehead, symbolizing marital identity and honor. To lose one wasn't just about money, it was about wholeness. The image was incomplete, and so is the kingdom without you. You feel it now, don't you? The sweeping, the searching, the lamp lit in the quiet corners of your soul. God is not waiting for you to shout. He is searching you out in the shadows, gently, carefully, completely. And when you're found, there's celebration. The parable says the woman calls others to rejoice, not because the coin deserved it, but because it was restored. That's the pattern of the kingdom, not just recovery, but rejoicing. You might smile here softly because if you've ever lost your keys for 10 minutes, you know the desperation. Now imagine God doing that for you. Every corner of your spirit swept, every moment of confusion tended, not because you were earning it, but because he couldn't bear the house without you whole. Some theologians say this parable highlights the feminine heart of God, searching, sweeping, celebrating. Others point to the quiet work of the Spirit moving through dust and routine to uncover what's sacred. And maybe tonight, you're that coin. You've felt dropped, forgotten, unimportant in the sweep of eternity, but you haven't gone unnoticed. You haven't stopped shining. You haven't lost your value, not in the eyes of the one who keeps count. And here's the beautiful twist: the coin couldn't find its way back. It had to be found. Somewhere in your story that's already happened. Or it's happening right now. A light has been lit. The floor is being swept, and you're being lifted. Not as an afterthought, but as a treasure. The kingdom isn't only concerned with crowds. It cares about one, and that one is you. So tonight, feel the hand of heaven brushing gently across the forgotten places of your life. Let yourself be found again. And know this, there is celebration on the other side of rediscovery. There is joy where there was only dust. Because the house isn't complete without you. And in God's economy, even a single coin is worth the whole search. You leave the quiet house behind and step back onto the path, the celebration still echoing in the corners of your mind. The sound of joy gives way to the clatter of hooves and the sharp footsteps of messengers moving urgently through a bustling town square. Up ahead, a long table is being prepared. Candles are lit, seats arranged, a feast is coming. But something is wrong. The seats remain empty. Jesus said a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. When the time for the banquet came, the servant went to summon the guests, but one by one they made excuses. I've bought a field. I've purchased oxen. I just got married. Each one had a reason. Each one said no. So the master becomes angry not out of ego but out of grief. He tells his servant, go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town. Bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And still, there is room. Go further, he says. Go to the roads and country lanes. Compel them to come in so that my house will be full. And with that, the parable expands into prophecy, not just of a banquet, but of the kingdom's radical invitation. Some scholars say this is a mirror of Israel's rejection and the gospel being offered to the Gentiles. Others see it as a reflection of how often we let life crowd out eternity, how everyday distractions become spiritual detours. And you stand now outside the feast watching the servant reach for strangers with urgency in his step and love in his voice. He doesn't discriminate. He doesn't hesitate. He invites everyone, even the ones who never imagined they'd be welcome. You may feel the tug now because we've all made excuses. We've all turned down God's quiet invitations with noble-sounding busyness. But this parable whispers the feast doesn't wait forever. There's a lesser-known detail in ancient Jewish tradition. 2 invitations were often sent, one to announce the banquet, and another when the meal was ready. So, when the guests declined the second time, they weren't caught off guard. They simply didn't care enough. They had better things, safer things, predictable things. And still the master's heart burns to fill the house. Not with the best, but with the willing. There's a soft, almost funny twist in the story. The most honored table in history ends up filled with people who weren't even on the original guest list, because grace loves to surprise. Some theologians point to this parable as a blueprint for how the kingdom turns expectations upside down. That the ones we think are closest often say no, and the ones furthest off end up sitting closest to the king. And maybe you're one of them. The one in the alley, the one on the back road, the one who wasn't invited the first time or maybe didn't feel worthy to respond. But the invitation came anyway. And it wasn't just polite, it was urgent. Because heaven has seats to fill, and your presence matters. More than you know, here's the heartache buried in the story. Those who refused the banquet never knew what they missed. There was no second round for them. The door closed, not as punishment, but as completion. The feast went on, and they weren't at the table. You pause now, standing just outside the great doors, candlelight flickering in your eyes. This is not just a story. It's a choice. The servant still calls. The seats are still open. The food is still warm. And the king is waiting. You don't have to come perfectly dressed. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to say yes. So tonight or now, in this sacred hush before sleep, fully claims you say it softly if you must. Yes, Lord. Yes, I will come. Yes, I will sit. Yes, I will feast on mercy. Because the door is still open, and your name is already on the list. You pass through the doors of the banquet and emerge into open landstone paths, giving way to soil buildings melting into breeze. You find yourself on a hillside, the sun casting long shadows, golden and soft. Nearby, 2 men are building. One digs deep, laying stone upon stone, slow and steady. The other works faster, setting his foundation on sand. Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the foolish man? He builds on sand. Both houses rise, both look secure. But then come the rain, the wind, the flood, and only one remains. This isn't just a construction tip. It's a quiet prophecy about storms and the souls who survive them. Some scholars say Jesus is finishing his Sermon on the Mount with a choice, a line drawn gently in the sand. Others note the wordplay in Aramaic here and obey are nearly identical, meaning you haven't truly heard unless you've acted. You can't build on his words if you're only listening to them. You have to live them. You walk up beside the 2 houses now. They look similar, same size, same angles, even the same view. But it's what's beneath them that tells the real story. Only one builder dug deep. Only one builder prepared for what was coming. And that's the whisper of the kingdom. Storms are not a surprise. They're a guarantee. But collapse that can be avoided. There's a lesser-known curiosity in Jesus' setting. The sand of the Judean valleys was deceptive. In the dry season, it was hard-packed and felt reliable. Only when the flash floods came did its weakness appear. And so it is with the soul. You may seem fine when everything's dry, but storms don't test your charm. They test your foundation. You smile here softly because we all want the easy build, the quick version of faith, the belief that feeling inspired is the same as being transformed. But Jesus says no. Not unkindly, just honestly. The kingdom is not built on agreement. It's built on obedience. Some theologians say this parable is eschatological, a final picture of judgment where only lives rooted in Christ endure. Others read it as a call to present faithfulness, to let truth sink deep into your habits, your thoughts, your rhythms. And maybe tonight, that digging begins. Not loudly, not in grand gestures, but in the small things, praying when no one watches, forgiving when it costs, choosing mercy when pride would feel better. That's how you build on rock. Stone by stone, word by word. Truth lived quietly until it becomes unshakable. You pause now before the two houses. The clouds have gathered. Wind begins to rise. And the difference becomes clear. One house leans into the storm. The other begins to tremble. It's not the storm that writes your legacy. It's the preparation before it. Jesus ends the parable with no fanfare, no applause. Just a simple reality: one house stands. The other falls. And great was its fall, he says, because it didn't have to fall. It looked fine. Until the storm asked the deeper question, what were you standing on? Tonight you ask it of yourself. What is my life built on? Feel no shame in asking. Only grace, because it's never too late to rebuild. The rock is still here. The storm hasn't arrived yet, and you have a choice. To dig, to trust, to plant your soul on something eternal. So when the rain comes, and it will, you won't just survive. You'll stand, and your house will hold. Because it was built not just on words, but on the word. The hillside recedes behind you, the echo of storms, and the weight of rock fading into the hush of twilight. You step into a shaded grove, where the light turns dusky purple and everything slows. Ahead, two figures linger at a gate, one clothed in robes of silk, the other in rags and wounds. They do not speak, but their stories do. Jesus said there was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered in sores. Lazarus longed to eat what fell from the rich man's table, but he received nothing, only silence. Only dogs licking his wounds. And then, as all stories eventually do, they both die. Lazarus is carried by angels to Abraham's side. The rich man, he opens his eyes in torment. And now their positions are reversed. This isn't just a tale of reversal. It is a quiet, burning prophecy about how eternity weighs what the world often overlooks. Some scholars say this is the only parable in which Jesus names a character, Lazarus. It gives dignity to the forgotten, while the rich man remains nameless, lost in his opulence. Because in the kingdom, identity comes not from status, but from surrender. You see it now. The rich man pleads from afar. Father Abraham, send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. Still he sees Lazarus as beneath him. Still he does not understand. But Abraham replies, between us and you a great chasm has been set in place. The gap that the rich man ignored in life has now become permanent in death. There's a lesser-known detail here in Jewish burial customs. Being carried by angels was an image of divine favor. And Lazarus, the man who had nothing in life, receives that honor, because the kingdom remembers those the world forgets. Some theologians argue this story isn't a parable but a prophetic vision, a glimpse into the afterlife meant to rattle comfort and provoke compassion. Others say it's an indictment of religious hypocrisy. The rich man calls Abraham father, yet never lived as a son of promise. And then comes the final twist. The rich man begs Abraham to send Lazarus to warn his brothers. But Abraham says they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. And when the rich man insists, Abraham replies, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. There it is, the prophecy beneath the prophecy. A veiled reference to Christ himself, who will rise from the dead and still be rejected by many. Because evidence doesn't change a heart, only humility does. You sit with that now. It's not wealth that condemns the rich man. It's blindness. Blindness to the beggar at his gate. Blindness to his own spiritual poverty. Blindness to the mercy that sat beside him day after day. There's a soft joke to hold here. The rich man had everything except a clue. He could afford banquets but forgot to buy wisdom. And tonight you're invited to remember what he forgot. That heaven is not impressed by portfolios. It's moved by compassion. It doesn't ask what you wore. It asks who you saw. The gate is in your story too. Someone sits on the other side of it. A person, a pain, a need you've passed by. And the kingdom whispers not an accusation, but an invitation. See them. Stop. Give. Not out of guilt, but out of love. Because the one at your gate may be closer to angels than you realize. And the act you think is small may ripple into eternity. So tonight, let your heart be soft. Let your eyes be open. Let the chasm never form between you and mercy. Because the table in Abraham's presence, it still has room. And heaven remembers the names the world forgets. The grove falls behind you, its shadows lingering like a memory. You now walk along a narrow ridge that hugs the coastline, where the air is crisp and tinged with salt. In your hand, you carry a small pouch of salt, coarse, glimmering sacred. And with each step, you feel its weight. Jesus once turned to his followers and said, "You are the salt of the earth." And then, almost as quickly, a warning. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? This isn't culinary advice. It's a parable, a quiet, sharp prophecy about presence, purpose, and how easy it is to forget both. Salt in Jesus' day was more than flavor, it was preservation. A shield against decay, a purifier, a symbol of covenant. In the temple offering, salt was added to every sacrifice. It was holy. And now, Jesus calls you that. You are the salt, not because you're perfect, but because you've been touched by fire. And fire changes salt into something that seasons others. Some scholars say this statement is about influence, the way believers quietly affect the world around them. Others argue it's about integrity. If your life has no impact, if your faith no flavor, then something essential has been lost. Because salt without saltiness is just dust. You pause on the ridge now, looking out over the sea, feeling the grains shift in your hand. They glisten in the fading light. And you wonder, have I lost my saltiness? Have I dulled under pressure? Melted into the background? Forgotten what I carry? There's a lesser-known curiosity here in the Dead Sea region. Salt was often mixed with gypsum. It looked the same but lacked flavor. You couldn't tell until you tasted it. And that's the parable's edge. It's not about appearance. It's about effect. Are you adding grace to the world around you? Or just blending in? There's a soft joke to rest with here. If someone says, "You've got too much salt in the kitchen," they're annoyed. But in the kingdom, heaven smiles. Because salt stings when it touches a wound, but it also heals. Jesus wasn't asking you to be palatable. He was calling you to be preserving. Some theologians suggest this teaching links directly to persecution. That salt losing its flavor is a heart growing afraid, a witness going silent. Others point to the danger of diluted doctrine, truth softened until it no longer transforms. But the call remains, stay salty. Not sarcastic. Sacred. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs preservation, purity, presence, and yes, flavor. The right kind of faith is not bland. It's bold. It invites. It awakens. It makes people thirst for something deeper. You feel it now, the weight of your calling, not as a burden, but as a holy tension. To be in the world, but not of it. To flavor it without disappearing into it. And here's the quiet encouragement: salt never works alone. It's always added to something else. You are not asked to be the whole feast, only to bring out what's already there. So tonight, as your breath slows and the sky deepens, remember who you are. Not a loud trumpet, not a distant star, but salt, quiet, essential, faithful. Even a pinch can change everything. Even a whisper of truth can preserve what is holy. So sprinkle grace, season with kindness, preserve what is good, and let the fire of God keep you flavorful, because the earth is decaying, but you are the salt, and heaven is not done using you yet. Night gathers gently, now draping the hills in velvet silence. You find yourself in a quiet village, its homes tucked into the land like lanterns. You pass a window glowing with oil light and step into a room with no one in it, just a lamp on a table, covered, hidden beneath a bowl. The room is dark despite the light. Jesus said no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. It's such a simple image, but within it, a quiet, radiant prophecy. You were not made to be hidden. You were made to shine. This isn't about fame. It's about function. Light was never meant for secrecy. It was meant for revelation. Some scholars link this parable to Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, calling believers the light of the world. Others say it foreshadows his own mission. God's light come into a world that too often prefers shadows. But either way, the message is clear. Light that is real reveals, not to boast, but to bless, You sit in the dim room now watching the covered lamp. Its flame is steady, but its glow is muted. The bowl above it was placed not by accident, but by fear. And maybe that fear feels familiar. What if I'm misunderstood? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't shine like others? And so the light stays hidden, still burning, but unseen. There's a lesser-known curiosity: ancient oil lamps were small, flickering things. They didn't flood a room, they lit just enough. And that was enough. The point was not to banish all darkness. It was to give people a way forward. That's what your life can do. You may not light the world, but you can light a room. You can guide a heart. You can warm a corner of someone's sorrow, but only if you're uncovered. Jesus said, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Not glorify you. Glorify Him. That's the quiet humility of real light. It doesn't scream, "Look at me." It whispers, "Look at Him." Some theologians say this parable challenges the false humility that hides behind "I'm not ready" or "I'm not enough." Others see it as a call to live visibly, to practice kindness, mercy, and justice, where people can see it and be drawn to the source. There's a soft joke for your heart. If your light had a personality, it wouldn't be the loud friend in the group. It would be the one who always has a charger when your phone dies. Dependable, quiet, life-saving. That's the kind of light Jesus is talking about. A light that stays lit in a storm. A light that reveals the table, the path, the next step. A light that helps others find their way. But you can't do that if you keep the bowl on. Tonight, the Spirit reaches gently toward your lamp, not to expose you, but to uncover you, to remind you this light didn't come from your strength. It came from His. You don't have to create it, only protect it, only place it, only shine it. And you don't need to shine perfectly. You just need to shine honestly. So pull the bowl back slowly if you must. Let your prayer flicker where someone can see. Let your faith glow even if it's small. Let your story spill light into someone else's darkness. Because the house is dim, and your light is needed. And you were never meant to burn alone. You step out into the open again, the night deeper now, the stars like whispers overhead. The road leads upward toward a hill where a crowd once stood. You hear echoes, voices layered with urgency and fear. At the top sits a widow, a judge, a Samaritan, a merchant, a son returning home. But now only one figure remains. A judge. Unbending, unmoved. Jesus says there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. But you've heard this before. This is the same judge from the parable of the persistent widow. So why does Jesus return to this image? Because within it lies another layer, a deeper insight into the nature of justice and delay. Here the focus isn't on the widow anymore. It's on the judge and the contrast between him and God. Jesus says, will not God bring about justice for His chosen ones, who cry out to Him day and night? Will He keep putting them off? And then I tell you, He will see that they get justice, and quickly. But quickly doesn't always feel quick. And justice in this world often feels slow. This parable isn't just about answers, it's about endurance. It's a prophecy wrapped in waiting. You sit now on the edge of the judge's platform. The world is quiet. The cries have faded. But one still remains. Yours. A lesser-known curiosity in Greek, the phrase translated, "He will bring about justice," carries the sense of vindication, as if God is not merely responding, but defending, restoring, making right. And that is the deeper truth here. When God delays, He is not idle. He is aligning. Some scholars point out the tension between justice delayed and justice done. But in the kingdom, delay is not denial. It is preparation, and sometimes the answer is not a verdict. It's presence. The widow never knew the full heart of the judge. But you are heard by one who does care, who does see, who carries your case not out of obligation, but out of love. You may smile here softly, because if heaven had a courtroom, your case would never be lost in a file. It would be carved into the hands of the judge himself, the one who bore injustice to deliver justice, the judge who became the advocate, who was silenced so you could speak, who was condemned so you could be free. And this is the quiet brilliance of the parable. It reminds you that your cries matter. Even if no one else listens, even if you've repeated them 100 nights in a row, even if your voice shakes when you pray, God does not delay because He is careless. He delays because He is careful. Careful with you. Careful with the timing. Careful with every strand of the story you cannot yet see. And maybe this parable is not just about justice in the end. Maybe it's about the transformation that happens while you wait for it. You become stronger. You learn to pray even when it's quiet. You discover faith that isn't based on outcomes. You find God not just at the answer, but in the asking, and when the time comes, He will act swiftly, completely, unmistakably. So tonight you wait, but not in despair. You wait like a widow with hope. You wait with trust braided into your silence. Because you are heard, and heaven has not forgotten. And your judge, he is already moving. The judge's hill disappears into shadow as you descend once more, following a narrow path lit only by moonlight. You pass olive trees swaying in a quiet rhythm, their silver leaves whispering above you. At the edge of a vineyard, a lantern flickers beside an open ledger. A steward stands over it, calculating, sweating, whispering to himself. Jesus said, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. He calls the steward in. Give an account of your management, he says. You can no longer be manager. Panicked, the steward considers his options. He's too weak to dig, too proud to beg, so he acts swiftly. He calls in his master's debtors and begins reducing what they owe. One by one, he writes down the new amounts. 100 measures of oil make it 50. 100 measures of wheat make it 80. And surprisingly, the master commends him not for dishonesty, but for shrewdness. And Jesus says the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Then a command with a curveball. Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. This is one of Jesus' most puzzling parables, a riddle wrapped in economic language. But beneath the surface, a quiet prophecy about eternal investment. Some scholars see this as a story of repentance. The steward, once wasteful, redeems his position by using his influence for mercy. Others interpret it as a commentary on worldly resources, that if even the unjust can act wisely when the stakes are high, how much more should we who know eternity live with purpose? You sit now beside the steward's ledger. It's half filled with changed debts, grace scribbled into margins, mercy where there was once burden. And this is the core of the parable. What are you doing with what has been entrusted to you? Because you too are a manager of time, of tenderness, of truth. And the question isn't how much you have, it's what you do with it. There's a lesser-known curiosity in Jesus' time. Stewards often acted as financial go-betweens, authorized to negotiate debts on behalf of their masters. What the steward did may have even been legally permissible. But what shocked the audience was his urgency, his clarity. He knew the clock was ticking, and so should we. Not in fear, but in focus. Jesus isn't celebrating dishonesty. He's celebrating the courage to act while there's still time. You may smile here gently because most of us don't think of spreadsheets as spiritual. But this parable reminds you even your money has eternal potential. Every gift, every sacrifice, every time you forgive a debt, financial or emotional, you invest in forever. Some theologians believe Jesus is pointing to the coming judgment. When your earthly life ends, what will welcome you into the next one isn't what you stored, but what you shared. You begin to feel it now, a quiet pressure, not of guilt, but of purpose. You have more than coins. You have words, attention, presence, forgiveness, influence, and each one is currency in the kingdom. Jesus closes the parable with this: whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. And there it is, the true audit, not of your income, but your allegiance. What drives your decisions? What holds your trust? What master do you serve? Because in the kingdom, stewardship is about faithfulness, not fame. About surrender, not security. You rise now from the steward's bench. The ledger closes behind you. Not because the work is done, but because a new question has opened. What will you do with what remains? The kingdom doesn't need you to be rich, only ready. Ready to give, ready to forgive, ready to invest in people, not just plans. Because one day, you too will be called to give an account. And when you do, may your hands be light, your debts be cleared, and your house be full of friends, welcoming you home. The ledger fades to silence, and the vineyard folds into the night behind you. You walk slowly now, not toward the next place, but toward something deeper, an ending that isn't quite an end. The sky above is velvet black stars, sharp as pinpricks in the curtain of time. A breeze lifts the edge of your robe like a whisper from another realm. Ahead, a field opens wide. In the center stands a man, a sower. He reaches into his bag and flings seed with graceful abandon. Some fall on the path, some among rocks, some into thorns, and some into rich waiting soil. Jesus says a farmer went out to sow his seed. And the seeds, they are the word of God, but not all receive it the same way. Some hear it, but the enemy steals it before it roots. Some receive with joy, but fade in trouble. Some grow, but are choked by worries, riches, and pleasures. But some fall on good soil. and they yield a crop, 100-fold, 60. 30. This isn't a story about farming. It's a prophecy about reception, about how the kingdom does not force its way in. It waits to be welcomed. Some scholars point out the scandal of the sower's technique. He's wildly generous, tossing seed even where it likely won't grow. But that's the heart of God, reckless with grace. Others see this parable as a mirror of Jesus' ministry, how some believe and others resist. But it's also about you. Your soul is the soil. You sit now in the middle of the field and the seeds fall around you one by one. Tiny, weightless, eternal. And the question grows in the silence. What kind of soil are you right now? It's not fixed. Soil changes. A heart once hardened can be tilled. A soul once shallow can deepen. Even thorny ground can be cleared if you're willing to let the gardener do the work. There's a lesser-known insight in ancient Palestine. Sowing often happened before plowing, which means the seed hit ground that hadn't yet been broken. And that perhaps is the grace of this parable. God sows before you're ready. He believes in what's possible, not just what's present. A soft joke for this moment: if God were a farmer, he'd be the one throwing seeds at sidewalks, hoping miracles might bloom through concrete. And sometimes they do, because the word has power. It doesn't rely on perfect conditions, just a willing heart. Some theologians say this parable explains all others. It's the key to understanding how Jesus taught and how we're meant to respond. Others highlight its pastoral tenderness. God is not angry at poor soil. He just keeps sowing. He never stops. You may have patches of all four types in your soul. You're not alone. But tonight here, in this sacred stillness, you can ask for the soil to be softened, for the rocks to be removed, for the thorns to be pulled up gently but surely, and for the seed to go deep. Because fruit isn't born in noise. It grows in silence. It grows in sleep. You feel it now, don't you? A planting, a deepening, a word settling in the quiet folds of your spirit. Let it stay there. Let it rest. Let it bloom in its time. Because you are not just soil. You are a garden, and the sower is near. So now, beloved traveler, the journey quiets. The last of the parables has been planted in you, and the field falls still. Above the stars, no longer shimmer with mystery, they simply shine like steady promises. The wind no longer asks questions, it only sighs. Even the angels who hovered near in the unseen fold their wings and retreat into silence. And you are safe. Not because the world is simple or the road is easy, but because the one who taught in parables walks beside you still. He whispers in riddles not to confuse you, but to draw you closer, to make your spirit lean in, to awaken wonder in your weariness, to let mystery be the pillow where your questions rest. You have heard the silent prophecies of Jesus told in seeds and coins and lamps and gates and servants' vineyards, widows and weddings. And each story has been gently woven into your night, like a lullaby in the language of eternity. So now lay back. Let your thoughts drift not in worry but in wonder. Let the parables echo softly like distant bells over water. Let the voice of the sower still your heart. Because your soil is ready, your lamp is lit. And the kingdom is closer than your breath. Close your eyes now. The story is complete. The light has not gone out. It has only gone inward. End of script. Sweet dreams.